Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, in honor of Will Geer's birthday, Will was born on March 9th. I thought I would dedicate this segment about Will. If you enjoy all of these various different sorts of segments that I do, or even just some of them, please do hit like and subscribe. I recently had this question from Susan Hoskins, who said, I would love to see you do one of these YouTube episodes on Will Geer and how he went off script, like details about when he was allowed to or when he just surprised everyone. I would love to see a compilation of those. So that's a little challenging because he did so much of it. And without scripts in front of me, it's a little tough to tell how much was ad-lib in the moment and how much was, I believe, Will tailoring or asking for various different additions or changes within some of the scenes, probably at table reads and things like that, that were sort of personal to him and that he felt were aspects of the character of Zeb Walton that he had brought to it. I did glance through a number of different episodes, some of the early ones, and just found some places where I'm pretty darn sure that this was Will, if not out and out ad-libbing, clearly embellishing and bringing his own stamp of his joy of life to them.
Just goes to show you things haven't changed.
Hey. Well, now you got yourself a boy. Congratulations. When the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up.
Good night, ladies. I heard that one on the radio. Karaoke, karaoke.
He quite often, added those little elements of a little dance or something to a scene. And our production assistant, John Dayton, has talked about how at one point it became his job to try to make sure that if Will was humming in a scene, that he was humming something that was in the public domain so that they didn't have to then dig up the rights to it or try to edit it out or try to edit something else in. So that was a little tricky, but early on, in many cases, I think there were particular songs maybe being added into scenes, but I think some of that may also have been Will. In The Boy from the CCC, it is my guess when he starts talking about how he wants the children to go out with him to pick strawberries, and then he sort of talks about how he's volunteering people, and he just scores, and you, and you, and you.
I need a few more volunteers. You, and you, and you, and you.
I have a feeling those you, and you, and you were probably Will ad-libbing, and then once again you hear him humming as he is leaving the scene. I've spoken at times about Will's background and love of nature and growing things and planting. He planted a Shakespeare garden at his theater up in Topanga Canyon. And Richard Thomas in an interview talked about how Will always had sort of a bag of like maybe seeds or something, and that he'd be, just chatting with you or whatever, and he'd be tossing wildflower seeds around or something, that it was just such an important part of who he was. And, understanding what the plants were. And so many times in scenes, he was talking with the younger children about aspects of nature and plants and trees and the interaction of all of those things in our lives. So I'm sure that he had, suggestions, and if not that those were necessarily ad-libs, but that he, I'm sure, was instrumental in why that became such a big part of the series and his character of Zeb. In the episode, The Ceremony, when he arrives to speak to Mr. and Mrs. Mann at their house, he brings a little plant, and I'm not sure that was something that was written in the script. I have a feeling it may very well have been something that Will chose to do, that he thought it would be a nice gesture to bring something, and he probably chose what it was.
Oh, Goethe.
Mint.
Dankeschön.
Now, whether when that scene happened, whether Mrs. Mann, who was actually played by Will's own daughter, Ellen Geer, whether she knew that he was going to be handing her something or not. Now, she does respond in German, but it's entirely likely that she knew, a German word for, for thank you or whatever. And he explains that it's mint, so it could have been just a lovely little ad-lib moment between the two of them. Ellen has worked with Will a lot, so it wouldn't have at all have been unusual for her to just go with something that Will did. That would have been something she was so used to. But it just had this very real, authentic spontaneousness to it that made me think that perhaps that was something that Will just decided to add. One of the things that was very common for Will was when Grandpa said grace, Will had a tendency to ramble on. And in the episode The Legend, we sort of have a little bit of an example of that, where he's saying grace and then he just kind of continues on.
Dear Father of us all, we thank Thee for the many blessings You seen fit to bestow upon us. We thank Thee for our riches. We thank Thee for our children. We thank Thee for the good earth. We thank Thee, O Lord, for the many blessings which You have chosen to bestow upon us. Thank Thee for the wearisome nights and for the restful Please don't interrupt when I'm addressing the man upstairs.
In An Easter Story, there are two different times when Will breaks into the song Bringing in the Sheaves, and he sings it as Bringing in the Sinners.
You can even make going to church sound wicked.
Well, that's one way, bringing in the sinners. Bringing in the sinners. Bringing in the sinners. Bringing in the sheaves. We shall come rejoice.
At the end of this scene with Elizabeth, this is sort of ad-libbed.
Careful now, honey. Don't cut yourself. That's it.
And then he is with the children and they're talking about the crocuses. And this also sounded a lot like Will, had a hand in that dialogue and what was being said and the conversation about the crocuses coming up.
What happened if they never come up?
Oh, they'll come up all right. As soon as they're ready, them crocuses will start croaking.
And then during the scene where they're recreating the show that Jason did when he auditioned and he sang Ironing Board Blues, that lots of ad-libs clearly in this little MC as he's MCing things, I'm sure. Just, if not the dialogue, then certainly his actions, his movements, the way he would embellish with the life of Zeb in these scenes.
I do believe I'm too modest to do the part justice. Still, I'll try. Please, no applause. I think there's no doubt we must award first prize in this contest to Monsieur Jasbo Walton or whatever.
Another case in the episode, the song, where as Grandpa leaves, he adds a little song to the end of it. So I can understand why the producers were so concerned about him continually adding music to things that then they would have to deal with.
I'm glad to hear that, old darling. Good night. Good night, ladies.
Good night, kids.
Good night, Daddy.
Be home early, Liv.
So those are a few snippets of times that and ways in which Will would ad-lib or embellish or really have a personal hand in what was going on. One of the other things I came across in just looking at different things and background about Will was I came across an interview that he did right before the series was first airing. And he's talking with the reporter about the nostalgia of the show and how Earl Hamner wrote real stories about life, about his life, like Thomas Wolfe did. And then they're talking about the Depression because, of course, the show was about the Depression. And the reporter was saying, well, you lived through that. And he's like, yeah, that he had a real understanding of having lived through that, of being poor, of his mother being a school teacher and getting paid in script and children bringing her apples. as a teacher, and that often those were cut up as part of the meal or the meal at dinner time because they were so poor, and it helped feed the family. But he said that during the Depression, they were trying to change things. There was prohibition. They were trying to change that. They were trying to stop war, stop fascism. But he said that people had a lot of courage. And he mentioned a Robert Frost quote that said, "The saddest thing in life is the best thing in life is courage." And I thought that was quite something. And so he felt that those times were different perhaps than having lived through it, than perhaps how we view it looking back at it. And for those of us who didn't live through it, he said they found a lot to laugh about during the Depression. And he said he read Walt Whitman in school, who said, "Passing strangers, shouldn't I talk to you?" And that he then made it a hobby in life to talk to somebody every day of his life.
And I've made it a hobby in life to talk to somebody every day of my life and get acquainted. I've only had my face slapped once. Once or twice I got called a dirty name.
And he also said that he felt that country people were less suspicious than city people were. He started acting during that time, and he worked in the Federal Theater with Orson Welles. And when asked if he had any advice for young actors, he said, "Learn a poem every day." And I know he often collected, people in the course of his life and his travels, and he would encourage them to come out to California, and he would let them come and stay at his compound up in where the theater was in Topanga Canyon. And he did that for young people or people wanting to come out and maybe try and get into the entertainment industry. And he was very generous with people. And I think having gone through hard times and having to build that sense of community where they pooled their resources and their talents to help get each other through those times, that was just something he carried with him throughout the rest of his life. I also came across something that after Will's death, that his daughter Ellen presented Earl Hamner with the Will Geer Humanitarian Award in 2015. And Earl said that Will was the first name he thought of when he received the order from CBS about the homecoming that it was going to be made, and that Will was not available because he was off filming Jeremiah Johnson. So they cast Edgar Bergen. But when it came time for the series, that Will was the first call they made. And a very sweet little clip I came across from the 1974 Tony Awards when Michael Learned introduced Will Geer, who sang a medley from the show The Cradle Will Rock.
You thought to Honolulu, where you're born it would be banned. Bid your family to the Lulu.
Universally, people who met Will loved him and were drawn to him. And he was kind and caring and interested in people and interested in life and interested in just enjoying life to the fullest and looking for the bright side of things. And he was an optimist. He didn't dwell on things that hadn't gone well. He was always looking for how, he could create something, whether it was in nature or in theater by creating his own theater and making it possible for other people to have jobs. So he was quite a unique individual, and it was a sad loss to us all, his TV family, his real family, and all of you who so appreciated his life and his career. So it has been a pleasure to pay tribute to him on the anniversary of his birthday. So thank you so much for joining me. A big happy birthday to Will from all of us. And I hope that you will join me next time for more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.